Hi, this is Tolek for the Andromeda Galactic Council and Transformational Shift Life Radio. Today is Friday, March 27th, 2020. I'm titling this report, Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness. I'm going to begin this report by reading the first sentence of paragraph 2 of the United States of America Declaration of Independence. I will make one change and exchange the word men for the word people. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And also, again, this time specifically from Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and happiness. And I am clarifying, for the sake of the topics addressed in this production, and with specific regard to the Federal Reserve Board, otherwise known as the Fed, that collection of private corporations which has been charging astronomical usury fees since the early 1900s for the currency outsourcing and printing for our government and supposedly for our people, that this private corporation, this private central bank, has been acting and portraying itself as a de facto arm of the U.S. government, and it has been promoting itself as a de facto arm of the U.S. government, which in fact it is not. However, it looks like this is about to change. Finally, and next, because I'm tracking certain aspects of our government's choices during this time of the alleged pandemic coronavirus, I'm going to read a segment from an article today which I read, which was written by Jim Bianco for Bloomberg. I'm now going to read just a couple of paragraphs within this segment of this Jim Bianco article on Bloomberg. And before I do so, I want to let you know that I have some considerable knowledge regarding what they're saying here, because within the last 12 years of my suit, coat, and tie career, I was an operations officer in international banking and finance. So in the middle of this article, it begins as follows. In just these past few weeks, the Fed has cut rates by 150 basis points to near zero and run through its entire 2008 crisis handbook. That wasn't enough to calm markets, though. So the central bank also announced $1 trillion a day in repurchased agreements. These are known as repos. And unlimited quantitative easing, which includes a hard-to-understand $625 billion of bond buying a week going forward. At this rate, the Fed will own 2/3 of the Treasury market in a year. But it's the alphabet soup of new programs that deserve special consideration, as they could have profound long-term consequences for the functioning of the Fed an allocation of capital in financial markets. To put it bluntly, the Fed isn't allowed to do any of this. The central bank is only allowed to purchase or lend against securities that have government guarantee. This includes Treasury securities, agency mortgage-backed securities, and the debt issued by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. An argument can be made that can also include municipal securities, but nothing in the laundry list above. So how can they do this? The Fed will finance a special purpose vehicle, SPV, for each acronym to conduct these operations. The Treasury, using the Exchange Stabilization Fund, will make an equity investment in each SPV and be in a first loss position. What does this mean? In essence, the Treasury, not the Fed, is buying all these securities and backstopping of loans. The Fed is acting as banker and providing financing. The Fed hired BlackRock Incorporated to purchase these securities and handle the administration of the SPVs on behalf of the owner, the U.S. Treasury, which is a government agency. In other words, the federal government is nationalizing large swaths of the financial markets. The Fed is providing the money to do it. BlackRock will be doing the actual trades. This scheme essentially merges the Fed and the U.S. Treasury into one organization. So, meet your new Fed Chairman, Donald J. Trump. To get the authority to stabilize these private markets, central bankers needed the Treasury to agree to nationalize, own them, so they could provide the funds to do it. In effect, the Fed is giving the Treasury access to its printing press. That means that in the extreme, the administration would be free to use its control. Pay attention to what this is saying here. The U.S. government administration would be free to use its control, not the Fed's control, of these SPVs to instruct the Fed to print more money so it could buy securities and hand out loans in an effort to ramp financial markets higher going into the election. For those of you who have been tracking this information and who are specifically interested in the composition, if you will, of the different departments of the U.S. government. And keep in mind, as I pointed out in my last video, which I produced just 5 days ago, the U.S. Federal Reserve boards, plural, because there are a number of families that own a number of these private corporations, which are located in Chicago, New York, San Francisco, Dallas, Atlanta, a few others. This central bank is a private central bank, and we as U.S. citizens have been paying usury debt service to this central bank since Congress adopted this private central bank years ago. As I mentioned in my last video, this is the debt that the media talks about in the trillions that we owe as citizens to the private Federal Reserve. For those people who are tracking this information, this should make you happy because there has been considerable talk in the world of a global financial reset that one of the key items would be the removal or the absorption of the Federal Reserve. Also part and parcel of this process is likely to be the eradication of the enormous amount of debt that's been built up, because quite frankly we could be around for many, many lifetimes and generations and still not be able to pay off the trillions in debt that has been accumulated under the management of the printing press and distribution outsourcing of U.S. currency to the Federal Reserve. I'm going to take the stance, and I believe pretty strongly that this action, in essence, is the beginning of the absorption of the Federal Reserve into the U.S. Treasury. And this ought to be one step that should make a lot of people very happy. Of course, the second step will be the complete dissolution and elimination of trillions and trillions of debt that is on the backs of its U.S. citizens. This is why I'm calling this video Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness. And last, I hope that you've enjoyed my summary analysis of this particular topic. It's out of my wheelhouse, or at least might be out of my wheelhouse as Tolek doing work for the Andromeda Council, but it's certainly definitely within the realm of my knowledge, given 12 years that I did in the latter part of my professional career as an operations officer in international banking and finance. I certainly have some considerable expertise that can be brought to bear in this situation, and I'm very encouraged by this action and this choice, in effect, for the U.S. the branch of the government, the United States Treasury, to absorb the Federal Reserve Board into its operations. It should mark the beginning of one of many major steps of our financial freedom so that we can be released as debt slaves. And this is exactly why I'm calling this piece Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness. Have a great weekend. Hodakote. Peace to you all.
Yeah.